We have Chuck Beatty back for another interview about his time on the Rehabilitation Project Force, the RPF in Scientology, which is the retraining gulag training camp for Scientology. And Janis and I talk a little bit about how the RPF was created on the flagship Apollo, and then also about our experiences on the Rehabilitation Project Force when we were in the Sea Organization. I think you're going to find this interview very informative. Stay tuned for Chuck Beatty. Another edition of Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher. I'm here with my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. How you doing today, Janis? Aloha.
Aloha and good day. I'm doing good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing good.
Yeah, well, we've got our returning guest who's very popular again, and we're going to talk to him about a subject that I know a lot of people are going to be interested in. And that's the Rehabilitation Project Force, the RPF. And
right.
When we first heard, when Chuck Beatty's our guest, and when he first heard that he had left Scientology in the Sea Org in the early 2000s or whatever, first thing we heard was that he'd been in the Rehabilitation Project Force for 6 or 7 years. I was like, how is that even possible? I mean, that's crazy that's that long.
I would have blown well before that, it's but I guess you get used to the way of life and you just kind of accept it and just keep following the rules.
Yeah. And you were in the RPF. I was in the RPF, but I was in the RPF and graduated and did the running program in 4.5, 5 months. You know what I mean? So the fact that 6-7 years was outrageous, that's crazy. So anyway, he's here to tell us the story. Yeah, he's here to tell us that story. We're going to talk about the Rehabilitation Project Force, and I think it should be an interesting story. We hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, let's bring on Chuck Beatty. Hey, Chuck, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
Good.
Doing good. Good to see you again.
Yeah, I want to bring up that we might laugh about stuff, and that's because we're rejecting it. It's not that we think it's funny, but it's so ridiculous, some of the stuff we did, including the RPF. So please don't feel offended if you see us laughing about ridiculous stuff that you would never even dream of doing.
That's exactly right. Because, at the time, there were things that were not funny about it at all. But we're talking years it's gone by, and you think back on how ridiculous that we even went along with it. I want to talk a little bit about the Rehabilitation Project Force. Janis, we did an interview with Ken Urquhart, who was L. Ron Hubbard's personal communicator,
yes,
and also had been his butler at St. Hill. And he was the one who actually wrote up the flag order setting up the Rehabilitation Project Force on the flagship Apollo, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And Jill Goodman was actually the messenger that did the message runs to Ken Urquhart when Ken put out this flag order, because Hubbard had been sick in his cabin and he was on a roll about all the counterintention that was going on. And I was on watch at the time. I was the senior messenger of the watch, and Jill was my second. Anyway, so Hubbard had been complaining about people not complying, the counterintention, nothing ever got done. And so Ken's solution was come up with the Rehabilitation Project Force. Now, Ken never said this, but we did have previous things where when people screwed up, they went to the mud box brigade on the ship. That was a mud box that we were trying to clear out in order to get an extra tank of fresh water, so that we could stay at sea longer. And so the people that were in trouble all got assigned to the Mudbox Brigade. Later on, there was also the Deck Project Force, which new recruits went to, and also people in trouble went there to get their ethics in or to get their case handled. And it was always a brief thing just to get fixed, cleaned up, and then back on track, back onto your old post or a new post. And then the EPF came along, the Estate Project Force, which replaced the recruits going to the Deck Project Force. And that still remained where people went for correction. And then nothing happened with that for a while. And then out comes the Rehabilitation Project Force, which Ken is the one who wrote it and sent it to LRH after he'd already had the issue published by Mimeo. So the crew were up in arms about this what is this, And so Hubbard had this message run going, and then it was like, oh, okay, then. And he sends it back to Ken, and he thought that would be the end of it. And then people just started being assigned to the Rehabilitation Project Force. And you're only supposed to be there maybe 3 months, some 4, and you're supposed to co-audit Scientology audit team, process team, to get yourself fixed and to get someone else fixed, and you graduate together. But I remember when it came out, I was like, oh, I never want to go to the RPF. They had to sleep down in the lower hold. They didn't have proper berthing. They just had mattresses they stacked up. They got the leftover food from the crew. Well, enough food was made for them as well, but the crew got to eat first, and then whatever was left all went to the RPF. It was not something that anyone was proud of. And when you saw these people, it's like you're just kind of happy you weren't on that team with them. And then they started creating their own rules, like running everywhere. That was not in the original flag orders. That was one of the bosuns who was in charge of the RPF decided to have them all run to get things done faster. And then if they messed something up, have them run a lap, which was run around the deck to shock them into present time. And then that became a standard thing. And I remember on deck with Hubbard, when he was talking to the bosun says, oh yeah, I'm having a lot of success, sending people on laps. And he's like, what's a lap? He didn't know what it was. So they explained, and he said, oh, okay, that works. And that was what people took as his approval of it, where it was already implemented, and he just accepted the idea. It wasn't something he said had to happen. And that's how different things like that came about. And the RPF, again, was only supposed to be a short period to get one suitable to go back on post.
I was going to say it, and it was called Rehabilitation Project Force. The idea was later it became like, oh, it's punishment, like you're really in trouble. But the idea was you would become rehabilitated as a staff member and as a Sea Org member. That's the other thing too. We're talking about Sea Org members who had signed a billion-year contract. I was just thinking about this, Janis, as you said this. Hubbard had been in the Navy, and Chuck, you were come from a military family, right? I just remember, like, you see it in movies and stuff where soldiers or sailors would be assigned to KP, kitchen patrol, if they messed up, where they had to go peel potatoes or clean garbage cans or do menial labor, as disciplinary actions in the military, right? Did you have any information about that, Chuck? Any experiences?
Absolutely. And the military, if you're in the military and you understand what you're in a life and death operation. As good as the military is, the business there is effectively eliminating the enemies of a country. I mean, the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and the Marines, they have different levels of determination. And, big Army is a big, I was a dependent. You're called a dependent when your father or your mother is the military primary person associated with the military. And of course, when I grew up, it was mainly my father. He was a 30-year veteran. We followed the rules. You kept your mouth shut. My father wasn't the combat military guy. He was the logistics guy. So he was the guy who was pen and paper, keeping track of nuclear weapons. That was one of his highest level securities that he had. And we were stationed over in Europe and Western Germany, where I spent 7 years altogether, learned German. My father remarried a German German secretary for him on the Army base where we were living. You know, I definitely support the U.S. Army kind of instinctively, so I could fit right into Sea Org militarism, and then I could understand a more compassionate and a more well-organized, genuine military thing. Like I think you too, Mark, because your dad was was he Army or Navy?
Navy, U.S. Navy, 23 years. Yeah.
But you understand the big Navy is very organized. They take care of their families. They take care. And so therefore I always thought, I thought we should make the Sea Org more like the military. But should that really be done? I think when you I disagree with that today, but I had that more organized mindset already. I'd already been a sort of little dependent kid growing up within one of the largest bureaucracies on planet Earth, which is the U.S. Army. When I was on the RPF for like 3 months, and then I was on the RPF 6 years plus, total 7 years. But the first time was 1989. It was, in some respects, a little bit more denigrating, but still milder. And there were all these great people on the RPF. So I never really had a problem ever being in the RPF, because you're there with, remember that one flag order by Hubbard, which said the Sea Org members are like these old salts. They're like, even though they're privates, they're like the top of the thing. So that is always the case in all my years on the RPF. There were always these stellar Sea Org members there. So I didn't really have a problem. I had a lot of respect for who I considered the higher, smarter people in the movement when I was there.
The experiences of the RPF over the years was different in every location and different with whoever was involved or over it, because my experience in the RPF was completely different than yours, Janis, and different than yours, Chuck. You know what I mean? And so it just depended. But that being said, being assigned to the RPF was a shock to my system when it happened to me, because I got sent because I was disaffected, because I didn't agree with what Miscavige was doing and Hubbard, and taking out all of Scientology International Management, Kerry Gleason, Bill Franks, David Mayo, and all that. And I was on the ComEv. So I got sent for that. And at that point, then I was questioning my time in Scientology, going, this is Hubbard's getting false reports, was my feeling on it, So I was a little resistant to going. But then, like you said, Chuck, once you get in there and you start, I had got assigned a twin, somebody that I was supposed to help. And you start doing the manual labor, which was basically for us. We were renovating the computer organization called Incom. We were setting that up. You get into doing that sort of thing, and all of a sudden you forget about why you're there. You just decide, I'm just going to get through it.
That was my experience, where it's a mindset. First, like myself, I was assigned twice. The first time was for rock slamming as a List 1 RSer, and I resisted and I refused to go. I got locked up for 11 days until I agreed to go. And then once I agreed to go and settled in, I was okay on being there, and everyone was so nice and became great friends, and I got in good physical shape. And the second time, like you, Mark, I was assigned for disaffection, and then I was pulled back. I was offloaded because I refused to go. And, that's a whole nother story we still haven't touched. But it's a mindset when you finally accept it and you go, okay, I'll just get through the program.
I got to the RPF in '89. It was because I was not getting the OEC check sheet fully written on time or something like that. And Jeff Walker, who was, I believe, the senior CSINT at that time, and as you know, Jeff was a very screamer. He was just a loud screamer type. And I came up in fall of 1989 to work on the OEC check sheet, which I thought I did.
Would have been 88. Would have been 88, right?
Okay, 19, that's right, 1988 in September. And I loved it. I mean, RTRC had Mickey Lipton as the boss. There was another screamer, nice looking young woman who was married to the backhoe guy, Chris, whatever
Chris
his
Byrne.
name.
Yeah.
Was it Chris Byrne?
Mary Byrne.
Mary Byrne. So I'm going to the RPF. Guess who's on the RPF at that time? So Jeff Walker's, guess who assigned me? Here's the way it went. So
and you're up at the gold base up at Gillham Hot Springs, right?
I just finished the OEC check sheet, send it in. Let's get some nitpicky little corrections on it. And then there's some large strategic issues regarding that. With all the data, I was an expert on that. And I'd already done an OEC check sheet in the past. So I was willing to go any direction you want to go, like a quick OEC, an extensive OEC. Are we going to do
OEC is the organizational executive
all the
course.
policies.
It was the green on white policies.
The green volumes, all the green volumes. I just had spent. So anyways, getting to my RPFing, I don't know what somebody's just saying it's taking too long or whatever, couldn't get it through. That was why I was being sec checked. So I'm getting sec checked, and Jeff Walker, the senior CSINT, is coming down to the unit, the LRH Technical Research and Compilations Unit. So it came up in my roots that I wanted to kill Jeff Walker. So I must have been RSing at that point. But anyways, as soon as I coughed up my overt, which was, I was premeditatedly intending to grab these heavy, remember those tape dispensers that had cement in them with plastic all around them?
Yeah.
We used those big heavy ones. I was going to take one of those and whack Jeff if he ever attacked me like Jeff was attacking the other members of RTRC at that time. I mean, Jeff just screamed bloody murder at people I respected. He was just screaming at people. And I thought, like, are you out of your mind? You can't do this. This is not the way things happen in the real world. Maybe they can happen on a ship when there's life and death matters, but not when you have your most gifted, skillful, literate scribe. So here's Jeff Walker destroying the psychological well-being of the scribe department. I was going to kill him. So anyways, so when John Horwich, the great John Horwich, takes me in session, and I have a lot of respect for John because he was a Class 8. He was a perfectionist. Anyways, he then pulled the whistle that I was going to smack Jeff Walker in the head. So bang, within 1 hour, I was on the RPF out at Happy Valley.
Let's get your experiences in the RPF at Happy Valley. Happy Valley was a property about, 10 miles away or whatever from Gillham Hot Springs. And it was through the Saboba Indian Reservation. And it was very remote with a dirt road that went right through the Indian Reservation. And it had been an old school or something, right?
No, it was... Yeah, it was an old school. It was called Valley of the Singing Larks. And there was nuns who had been out there. And they had a swimming pool and a basketball court in the swimming pool and lots of little cabins and stuff like that for kids. And then we picked up the property next to that as well, the Campbell property. And that's where the trailers were put for the RPF to keep them separate from, originally and when we moved out to Hemet, to Gillham Hot Springs, where the base was, or the gold base, when we first moved out there, there was not going to be enough room for everyone to live when we came from La Quinta. So Happy Valley was purchased for overflow. And so the married couples were put out there. And because they got to go home at night, when the bus was going, they had to go. So they would go and they would they'd set up a fire pit and sit around and kind of cook marshmallows type of attitude out there. And that's why it was called Happy Valley.
Yeah, it was a dump. It was a complete dump, just so people know. Up until when I left in 1990, it was still a dump. I mean, literally, there was the old Gillman house. No, not the old Gillman house. What was it? There was an old house there. There was the Campbell house, which when I went out there, my wife later went to the RPF out there, and that's where I saw her because the RPF were in the Campbell house. And I never once saw the swimming pool because it was overgrown and never used, and it was just the whole place was a dump. Let's just put it that way. And that's where they would send people. That's where security would send people who, quote unquote, wanted to leave, or leave the base. They put them out there because it was so remote, you would have a hard time getting to civilization from there.
Yeah, well, people had to, if you tried to blow, you'd have to go through the jungle to get to all the woods to get back to the reservation, and then getting through that. Yeah, the rattlesnakes, and then getting through the reservation. You know, they already had trouble with the bus going through and getting shot at. So it was like it was well protected from people blowing from it because of the environment. And I know some of the kids tried to blow, and one of them went over the hill the other way, not through the reservation, and that's how she got out.
Yeah, and Arthur Hubbard, LRH's youngest son, Arthur Hubbard, he went to the RPF out there, and I remember because we had to screen his letters back and forth between him and Mary Sue Hubbard. He was out there, and he was under guard, and he tried to escape a few times as well. And there was a creek bed, and anyway, you did not want to go to Happy Valley. Let's just put it that way. But
Bill Dendu, his blow.
Yeah.
They had the gate closed, and he had a little convertible, and he was back there arguing with Ronnie, and he was blowing. He was out of there, and he didn't care that gate was chained, and he went through it, and he ended up messing up his head and going to hospital.
The gate went over on because he had a convertible. It went over and hit him in the head as he drove through the gate. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a prison camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much history. It's funny. I always look at the positives. I hated getting up so early in the morning on the RPF out there. It was like dark. It was in January, so it's the shortest days of the year. And I remember too. All of the buildings were just like you say, Mark. They were horrible. And the swimming pool, which was later cleaned out when the kids took over the ranch like 3 or 4 years later, and the kids used the pool a few times. And then another point is, Janis, you mentioned the trailers for the RPF. Well, it must not have been the red trailers that we had when the German news helicopter flew over. And me and Bruce Hines have been interviewed by that reporter. But this is an issue which I'm going to throw at you guys real quick here. The repurposing, that the real world idea is repurposing throughout the Sea organizations. And truly, I would probably say the Scientology building use, wherever LRH was, offices would be almost constantly being repurposed for this or another of LRH's ideas. And the ranch got repurposed. The buildings, like the Campbell House, was used for like the most extreme people, the most extreme threats at time. There probably were some times when they kind of used it, like when remember the movies, some of the movies, like the one movie about Africa. Remember the Africa tech movie? I think that during that time the Campbell House was used in a different way, sort of like a break place for some of the WOG actors or whatever to hang out at the Campbell House. I mean, the buildings got repurposed, and then people were sent away. Even when I was on the RPF camp later in like 1997 or 1908, when the German helicopter flew over, or they were heard of threats, guess what they did? They sent the most bad RPFers up those long roads that go up into the mountains, the back way, or you'd have to walk about 15 miles to get over those mountains. Right. And we were told to just keep walking as a group with our watch, because there's always some RPF members that are in good standing. So if you're in the group of bad RPFers, the ones who want to route out or are considered a threat all the time, that group gets washed by two or three other RPF members, and we all trotted out these long roads going way back on the way to, is it Palm Desert, which are over those mountains or on the other side of those mountains?
Yes.
And it would be, and then if you go another direction, it would go to Banning. But guess, when I was there was a CST staff member, Jeff Kretz. He escaped to Banning. So he escaped all the way to Banning. Maureen Bolstead, who you both know, she only got a certain degree.
Right.
Bruce Bromley, he got over those mountains or got out of there another way. You follow the creek bed the wrong way, and Banning, I think, is your best ticket to civilization, or you go down the road so there were plenty that tried to escape that even when I was there the later time. But in '89, it was it was kind of a smaller RPF. I would say there were maybe 40 or 50 people, and a lot of people I looked up to. Jeff Logan had been my superior back in the International Training Org days. And as you know, Jim is a kind of a really stubborn, put his foot down type of guy too. And he stood up to Miscavige and then he got booted out. But it was in his nature to be like that. And in some respects, that's a really good trait to have. And that's kind of gets you out of that.
So how did you get out, in 1989? Because you said you weren't in for very long, right?
So I got demoted from the INT RPF because I really wasn't going to be coming back to INT after being RPF from RTRC. So I think a decision was made to send me down to the PAC RPF and then from the PAC RPF. So that's what I did. So in February, I went down to the PAC RPF. So I was only on there for a month and a half. And then the great Dan Kuhn and Tom Ford and whoever else was on my review ComEv, because your review ComEv gets done usually by people in the unit you were in who are sympathetic to you. They did the review ComEv because Jeff Walker had been sent to the RPF. So whatever bad things I had thought about doing to Jeff Walker were now canceled because Jeff is a bad egg. So that's one of the sad things about the Hubbard system. People look down on this person just because right now he's in a bad state. So therefore, all the tension is kind of like this childish, juvenile,
loyalty switches.
Condemnation. Yes, Lord of the Flies crap that goes on all the time. You get to the RPF and you can be buddy with people you're working with days. It's more normal almost to be your life to be honest and interacting with RPF members than it is to be in the Sea Org where you have to almost be careful of what you say. But like
in 1990, I know they shut down the gold RPF because that's how Paul and Logan got out. There was the reprieval and they were assigned to estates in gold because Paul was made the sports field in charge. So I think they got rid of the RPF as well in PAC. And then later on, they brought it back.
I got out of the PAC RPF before I went into back to being a course supervisor, did a couple of years, got up to ASI, worked in the computer branch, then got to ASI. And then in ASI, my boss there, who was incredibly nice to me until she came back from apprenticing at RTC on how to be a product officer. That was Barbara Ruiz. I have mixed feelings about her. I think she's an exceptional hostess. She's a very sophisticated person. She came from a wealthy family and so forth. And she was my superior at Author Services when I got bumped up from the computer branch to working as the establishment officer at ASI. And of course, when you're an establishment officer, you're pretty much HCO. You have to get the new people. My job was to get an ethics officer who could put Norman Starkey's ethics in. That was my job. I failed getting an ethics officer for ASI. So therefore, I started to get increasingly the bait and badger and then the screaming tactics, the pressure. I'm getting the slamming and the horrible, sort of get the product, you're a nobody, and then you get the liability and then you get the next lower condition, you get the next lower condition. And then one day, Barbara's threatening me with her letter opener right at my throat. When Barbara was pointing the letter opener to my throat, I thought, does she know that I got a button about putting a knife to my throat? Because that's where we grew up on the military base, roughhousing and knifing each other. So I don't think she did, but unfortunately she could see that I was, because that was a Miscavige thing, which was to fiend a person's button and pressure them on it. Like the guy who had a saxophone taken away, Miscavige would dominate by finding what it was that you considered valuable and then remove it from your life. So anyways, I thought, hey, this is insane. Working at Author Services should have been LRH's org, should have been LRH Purse's office. Everybody's there for the right reasons. There shouldn't be any need for screaming. So then I go to the RPF. Then I go onto the deck. I felt that the second RPFing, I felt honorably disloyal to LRH. And I thought that was the legitimate reason for me to go to the RPF was.
Okay, now when was this? When was this that you went to the RPF the second time?
I had my sec checking in late 95, early 96. And then I think it was, and then, at that time, 95, 96, Miscavige had to approve anybody, senior people, going to the RPF or not. You couldn't just send them yourself. Like ASI could not send anybody to the RPF. You pretty much had to become un-ASI, become gold staff, and then the CSW go and get approved for you to go to the RPF. So that took 6 months. As of December 95, at each year, Miscavige still was having everybody get out of lower conditions so they could go to Big Bear for the group good times on Christmas and New Year's. And me, I was the only person who was still on the decks in December 95 when everybody else had got their CSWs approved, because there was an order from Miscavige. Everyone has to be able out of lower conditions so they can take part in Christmas at that time. Now, I was from ASI, so I really wasn't in staff. So therefore, I was the only one who was on the RPF at that moment. And then in January, that's when the other people started coming back. That's when Mark Yeager got busted in January.
Well, now, when you went to Happy Valley in 1996, was it different physically, like the location? I mean, not the location, but like, the facilities and that type of thing by that time?
Yes, mainly due to the orders. John Wiley was the RPF in charge, the gold staff member who was the RPF in charge. And there was a whole project to set up the RPF to be more decent than it had been in prior years. So it was set up to be a actual decent operation. The criticism of it was turned into a holiday camp. So the RPF, when I got there, they had a day off or a partial day off for the RPF members who were gold band to spend some time with their spouses who came out to Happy Valley to be with them. John Busby, you remember him? He was the ESTO for the RPF. Guess what he did with John Wiley, who was the RPF in charge, an outside member who was the boss of the RPF. John and the two Johns, John Busby, who was on the RPF ESTO, getting all the needs of all the RPF members, they would go to Walmart and you did your shopping list of goodies that you bought from Walmart.
Well, that was like that when I was in the PAC RPF in '83. We had the same thing. You know what I mean? We literally had Barbara Griffin and Gene Detcheff, and they did the same thing. We could make a shopping list, and they would go to CVS or whatever and buy whatever we needed. No, we had the same thing back then.
On a weekly basis, even?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But like I said, everybody's RPF experience was different depending upon where you were at and who was in charge. Because you're saying now in '96, John Busby and John Wiley, they had this whole thing set up too.
Bruce Bromley was the RPF bosun. The rules that were in the flag orders were tossed out. And Bruce Bromley, who came from senior sis into office and withstood all of that haranguing that Jeff Walker put on him. And I observed some of Jeff Walker's. I don't know why Bruce went to the RPF, but he was a good guy. Miscavige is the reason the RPF took so long. The implementation of the what we call the golden age
of tech. Golden age of tech.
We did all the drills binders. We did all the drills binders, which took months. You couldn't even. I don't even think the quickest students could get through the drills binders quick enough, even if you're a class 8 like Bruce Hines.
We want to thank Chuck for being here. We want to thank our sponsor, Janis Gillham Grady's OUTBACK Naturals, complete liquid multivitamins. Ditch the pills, drink the power. And it's all your vitamins in a liquid form, peach flavored. After you open it, you leave it in the refrigerator, you take it out, shake it up, 2 tablespoons or a little shot glass, and you've taken your vitamins for the day without the pills. And I know, Chuck, you've been taking it, I've been taking it. And if you're interested in ordering it, you just go down below in our merchandise store, click on the link there. You can order it there, or you can go to Vites.com or scan that QR code. And Janis will ship it to you in the United States. Is that right, Janis?
Yes, and Chuck actually just placed a new order, a replacement order last night, and it got shipped out this morning, Chuck.
Yes.
Yes, so
great.
Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to mention, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. Rock slam that like button, rock slam that notification button so that you know when we have new episodes come out. And then also, we need, you know, it helps us get out the message to people who don't normally watch our show. If you subscribe and hit that like button, it helps the YouTube algorithm. If you have any questions or comments about what we talked about here, please go down below. Chuck answers them, I know, because we have his answers to previous shows. He watches other shows too, and we do too. We read them all, so we appreciate any feedback from everybody. And then finally, if you'd like to buy us a coffee, which helps support the channel, go down to the video description. There's a link there. You can follow that to help support us so that we can keep doing these shows. All right. Is there anything else you guys would like to say so we can end off the show here?
Thank you, Chuck.
All right. Until next time, everybody. Bye-bye. We'll see you later.
Bye.